The Wishful Journey. Mark was a cheerful and lively 8-year-old boy. He loved playing, dreaming, and exploring the world around him. But sometimes, his curiosity would get the better of his obedience. One day, when his parents told him not to touch the chocolate cake they had left on the table for the evening party, Mark decided to disobey. A thought popped into his head. What if I take a small bite and no one will notice? He sneaked into the kitchen, cut a piece and quickly ate it, thinking his parents would never find out. But soon his mother noticed the missing piece. She asked gently but firmly, "Did you eat the cake?" "No," Mark lied, staring at the floor. His mom and dad exchanged glances. They knew he wasn't telling the truth. His father sat beside him and said, "Mark, we're not angry, but it's important to tell the truth. When you lie, it hurts not just us, but you too." Mark pouted angrily. He didn't like being caught. He felt upset and ashamed, but instead of apologizing, he yelled, "I don't want to see you anymore. I want to disappear. I want to be alone, so you'll never scold me again." His words echoed through the room. His parents exchanged sad looks, but they didn't argue. Mark ran to his room, wishing he could disappear. When Mark opened his eyes, he found himself on a stunningly beautiful planet. It immediately struck him with its serenity and beauty. Everything seemed lifeless, yet somehow full of life. The air was so pure and fresh that Mark breathed it in with delight, feeling a gentle breeze caress his face. Endless fields of golden green grass stretched out before him, shimmering under the soft light of two suns, one warm yellow, the other cool blue. Together they cast a strange but peaceful harmony of light and shadow on the planet. As Mark walked on, he noticed the unusual trees growing around him. Their tall trunks were covered with silvery bark that gleamed in the light, and their branches were adorned with large, translucent leaves. The leaves sparkled, reflecting the sunlight as if they were made of glass. They made a soft, barely audible rustling sound when touched by the wind, reminding Mark of a gentle song, as if the planet itself was speaking to him. Along the way, he encountered strange plants he had never seen before. One of them resembled a giant open flower, large enough for Mark to hide in its petals like a shelter. The petals glistened with soft hues of purple, pink, and blue, and a faint, sweet fragrance wafted from its center, a mix of vanilla and freshly cut grass. When Mark touched one of the petals, it felt as soft as silk. As he walked further, he was surrounded by bushes covered in glowing berries. These berries reminded him of little fireflies, lighting his path with a soft glow. When Mark picked one, it immediately burst into thousands of tiny sparks, leaving a feeling of warmth and lightness on his skin. But despite all this magical beauty, Mark felt lonely. There was no one to talk to, no one to share his feelings with. Everything around him was perfect, but his heart felt empty. The more he walked, the more he realized that even in such beauty, loneliness was a heavy burden. Finally, tired from his journey, Mark came to a massive tree whose branches stretched high into the sky. It stood like a living giant, guarding this peaceful and beautiful planet. Its leaves, like mirrors, reflected the light of the two suns, and under its mighty branches lay a cool, calming shade. Mark sat down beneath the tree and closed his eyes, feeling the world around him slow down. He wanted to go home, but was afraid his parents would scold him again. Quietly, he whispered, "I want to go home, but I don't want my parents to scold me anymore." The world around him remained silent, and nothing changed. Mark stayed on the planet, alone and lost in its magical beauty. Mark awoke on a new planet, surrounded by a completely different landscape. This was a planet of stones and waterfalls. Vast plains stretched out before him, dotted with enormous crystals and rocks, each glowing from within. These stones seemed alive, shimmering under the sun's rays like falling stars frozen on the ground. The crystals scattered across the landscape emitted a soft glow, as if they were breathing with the planet. They came in every shade, from bright blues to golden ambers, deep reds to silvery whites. Each had its own unique shape. Some resembled perfectly cut gemstones, while others took on whimsical forms of nature. Some were towering like massive spires, while others were small, but no less brilliant. As Mark walked forward, the ground beneath his feet changed color, from emerald green to sudden azure. Along his path flowed crystal clear streams, merging into small rivers. The water was so transparent that Mark could see every detail of the shimmering crystals and stones at the bottom. The streams made melodic sounds, like the ringing of bells, as the water flowed over the smooth rocks. On the horizon, Mark saw a massive waterfall cascading from a great height into a shimmering lake. The water sparkled like liquid silver, and strange floating flowers, like translucent bowls, drifted on the surface. These flowers gently bobbed with the waves, emitting a soft light. Mark approached in awe of the sight. At the base of the waterfall stood massive crystals, their smooth facets reflecting light in such a way that every drop of water turned into a rainbow of colors. He sat on a rock by the lake's edge, and the cool mist from the waterfall refreshed his face. Once again, Mark felt a pang of sadness. Despite the awe-inspiring landscape, something still weighed heavily on his heart. He wanted to go home but feared being scolded again. Closing his eyes, he whispered, "I want to go back home, but I wish my parents would never notice my bad deeds." But just like before, nothing happened. Mark opened his eyes to find himself on a third planet, the most wondrous of all. The air was filled with the scent of fresh grass, and the sky was covered with soft clouds that looked so close he thought he could reach out and touch them. All around him, amazing creatures roamed, looking as if they had stepped out of a children's storybook. The first creature he noticed resembled a giant fluffy bear with butterfly wings. Its fur was soft and glistened in pastel shades of pink and blue, while its wings shimmered with a gentle pearlescent glow. The creature glided gracefully through the air like a butterfly, emitting a soft, melodic sound like a whispering breeze. A little further on, Mark saw another creature. It looked like a massive snake, but instead of scales, its body was covered with soft, striped feathers. It rolled across the grass like a ball, making joyful sounds that resembled laughter. It bounced and played among the blooming bushes, like a child's toy brought to life in a world of fantasy. Mark laughed with delight, watching these kind and amusing beings. But soon, his attention was drawn to a giant turtle slowly moving among the trees. This wasn't just any turtle. Its shell was adorned with patterns resembling star constellations. In its eyes shone a flicker of ancient wisdom, as if it had lived for thousands of years, observing worlds and their inhabitants. Mark approached the turtle, unable to resist telling it his wishes. "I've already made 2 wishes to go home, but for my parents not to scold me or notice my bad deeds. But each time, nothing works. Why?" The turtle looked at him with its deep eyes and slowly said, "Love, my dear friend, doesn't depend on conditions. We are loved not because we do everything right, but because of who we are. Parents scold not out of anger, but because they care. Love isn't about ignoring mistakes, it's about accepting each other, even with them. Mark thought deeply. He realized he had been trying to avoid responsibility, thinking that his parents' love could be changed if their attention to his mistakes was removed. But the wise turtle had taught him an important lesson. Love is real when it accepts you entirely, even when you make mistakes. The turtle slowly walked away, leaving Mark in silence. He no longer felt the need for magical wishes with conditions. He closed his eyes and made his final, most important wish. I want to go home because I love my parents, and they love me, no matter what. Mark opened his eyes and found himself back at home. His room was just as he remembered, and his mother and father stood beside him. His mother hugged him tenderly, and his father kissed him on the forehead with a smile. Their faces glowed with joy. We're so happy you're with us, his mother said, holding him tightly. We love you, son, added his father. Mark looked at them with new understanding. He realized that no magical planets could replace his parents' love. They loved him not because he did everything perfectly, but simply because of who he was. Forgive me, Mark said, tears welling up in his eyes. Now I understand that you always cared for me. His mother wiped his tears and smiled. We'll always love you, no matter what. Family is where you are always accepted, added his father. Mark hugged them both tightly and whispered, I love you. And in that moment, he understood that home is where you are loved the most.